Good morning, folks. Dr. John Taylor Kent here, and welcome to Awakening Israel. The purpose of my channel and my mission is to awaken our brothers and sisters in Israel. Most of our brothers and sisters in Israel do not know who they are, and almost none of us realizes who the enemy is. The purpose of my channel is to awaken you to the great battle that we are in. Hopefully in time to save the day. I don't know. Check out my video I uploaded on the other channel this morning, in which I point out a sociopath for you all to see, so you can know what a sociopath looks like. You can see one. Of course, sociopaths come in all kinds of forms, shapes, and sizes, and genders. But this one I have to call out publicly because he's done his best to destroy the nation. Actually, he has destroyed the nation by allowing this weird administration. Now, the enemy's running around in the background. They don't come out in the foreground very much, but occasionally they surface. And I want to tell you where they came from. So just hold on to your horses, hold on to your seats. I'm going to do my best to tell you the history of the bad guys. Because if you don't know who the bad guys are, then you're lost. We're lost. We're losing. Does it feel like we're winning out there right now? I mean, seriously. Are we making progress? I know that's probably a bad word, huh? No, it's regressing is what's happening. We have the regressive party in charge. Okay. There was a revolt, the Maccabean revolt in Israel, the old Israel, which had the people in it still, and it wasn't the proper promised land in their own borders. They never expanded their borders to the Bible prediction, Bible prophecy, by the way. They never quite got that big. However, their borders were much bigger than what we realize. They did get the whole Saudi Peninsula, for instance. John Hyrcanus prevailed in the Maccabean revolt. Now, as far as the years go, it kind of depends on when you start it. Kind of like the war we're in now, it depends upon where you want to mark it as having been begun. Did it begin with some false exercise regarding our health? Or did it begin with some election shenanigans? Or did it begin in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at the behest of the international bankers who decided to pull the plug? Or was it a decade ago when the people at a famous hotel over in Europe cheered after they said, we're taking the United States down? And people were screaming, let's give it to the Americans. Let's give them what they have coming. Let's wall them up and make sure they can't get out and cause mischief ever again. No, we haven't been exactly good boys and girls in the United States of America, which is why we have to turn to Creator Father Yahweh. I'm sorry. The only way to do it is to sit on your butt and read the Bible for yourself. It takes effort. It's the only way you're going to get there. The best Bible in the world, I call it my Bible, but it's not. It's just that I get to represent them and sell them. But you take the link that I'm providing down below, you copy and paste it in your browser, and you'll get the best price anywhere. Prices are low. They're cheap. Sales are not going really very good. Everybody's holding on to whatever they've got. And I can't blame them, because the velocity of money in this current economy is lower than it was during the Great Depression. Well, maybe not that far just yet. But that was the implications when I looked at the velocity of money. Certainly, the velocity of money is worse right now than it has been in any of the recessions. So, what we are in is beyond a recession. They've got this thing set up so that they can flip the switch and go in other directions at any time they want and whip us around and really beat us. John Hyrcanus prevailed in Israel, and he won that revolt, the Maccabean revolt. I don't know much about the history of it. However, I do know that John Hyrcanus, at the end of it, told the Edomites who lived in Mount Seir, convert, get circumcised, worship the one true God, and I'll let you live. Otherwise, he was going to put him to death. And of course, with an offer like that, those guys complied totally. They got circumcised. They started worshiping or pretending to worship the one true God, Yahweh. They started going to the temple in Jerusalem. There's a problem with that. They were mainstreamed into the Israelite population at large. And you have to remember, at the time of the revolt, only 2 tribes had returned from the captivity in Babylon. Generally speaking, you had the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. Yes, you had some Levites. You had some from the other tribes or other houses, but not very many. Most of them were in captivity in the land between Assyria and the Medes, where they were placed as a buffer. And then when the time came and they could escape, they broke north and went across the Caucasus Mountains. That's how come we're called Caucasians. And broke into Europe and the rest of the world. A lot of them went around the Caucasus Mountains. Many had left the Promised Land way before that. Some by foot, some by ships. So we had spread out quite a bit by this time. And the vast bulk of Israelites was not in Israel. We had been pulled out with the attacks starting in 722 BC. And I don't think that we got to return until 650 BC. And it was just the people from Jerusalem, from the house of Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar had pulled them out and taken them to Babylon, they were the ones that went back. The Israelites, the prophet said they weren't going to go home again. They would never return. They would leave to a land that had not been inhabited, and they would be called by the name of their father's father, Isaac, Isaac's sons, Saxons, and they would forget who they were. And they would worship Yahweh, abide by the 10 Commandments, better in the lands that they were going to than they did back in Israel. At least one would hope, because they didn't do a very good job back then. So you want to fix the problem? Turn to Yahweh. Get my Bibles. Give them for gifts. Don't send me your money, although I'm on the verge of saying, I give up. I need some help. I really do. I've had some really bad luck. But anyway, enough about me. John Hyrcanus prevailed, and the Edomites that lived in Mount Seir were mainstreamed in the population properly, which was a real shame, and they became pretty powerful. The Edomites did. And by the time Jesus Christ, Yahshua the Messiah, was born, Herod the Great, the Idumean, was in charge of Israel. The Romans had put him in authority. Idumean, that is the Greek word for Edomite. So Herod the Great, through his conniving, rose to greatness and had the power. It's in the Bible, it's in the New Testament. Herod the Great was an Idumean. Look it up. Now, there was another, there's two directions I can go in. I can go backwards to the origins, or I can go forward to the current places these people are. Which do you want? All right, I'm going to move forward. If we read in the Bible, in the book of Joshua, Joshua failed in his mission quite often. He was told to kill them all. And I know a lot of people think, boy, our God is not that God. And our God would never do that. Nothing but love, pure love, picking flowers in the sunshine on the hillside. Then why did our God, in the flesh, create a whip of ropes, take ropes and make a whip, and go after the money changers in the temple? Overturn their tables, beat them with it mercilessly, was enraged. Of course, a week later, he paid for it. They put him up on that stake. Okay. About 700 AD, there was a country up north of I wanted to say Khazarian, but it's Caucasian Mountains. And the country's name was Khazaria, and their chieftain was called the Bulgar. And Khazaria was big. I mean, Khazaria actually took probably the western half of Russia, all of the Ukraine, and further around. It was really a big country. And the Khazarians were noted for being a sociopathic culture. You want to know what a sociopath looks like today? My video's uploading on the other channel. I call out the guy, I identify him for you. At great risk to myself, because I'm not a man of means. I can't defend myself. But the country, our nation today, and the Israelites here and around the world are all at risk. So what does it matter what happens to me? I only have one life anyway. Don't want to say too much here. They'll take me up on my stuff, but I'd rather go on my feet than in one of their camps. Okay, the Bulgar had a problem. Around him, on the one side, were his enemies, and those were the Muslims. And if he converted to Catholicism, the Muslims would go after him. And the other side were the Catholics. And if he converted to Islam, they would go after him. And he found out there's more to it than this. I'm just telling you the simplified story. He figured out that the Jews could go freely among the Muslims and among the Catholics. They got along with everybody. They were merchants. And so he decided that in order to make his nobles loyal to him, he would require them to convert to Judaism. So when the word reached Mount Seir, at which the Edomites were still holed up after all those centuries, when the word went down to the Jews at Mount Seir, they decided, hey, let's go up there and help them convert to Judaism. So they migrated from Mount Seir up into what we call the Ukraine today, basically, and beyond the Ukraine. A really big country. They loved war. They loved it so much. Oh, by the way, they had a banner under which they fought. And in case you ever look at the militia groups and the uniforms and the shoulder patches, the unit patches, there's a little tiny emblem, the same emblem, there's a name for it. Kind of looks like a weird dragonfly or kind of a weird bird. This is the symbol under which the Khazarians waged war. They loved it so much they kept a standing army. Now, supposedly that army was really massive. The figure 40 million stands in my mind. And they would lend that army out to the neighbors for a price, and the neighbors could wage war on each other. Well, about 1100 AD, the White Russians and the Belarusians, the Belarus and the Rus, had it with their sociopathic neighbors and their warring ways. So they drove them off. And so they basically obliterated Khazaria, and the Khazarians escaped, migrated to the west. They went into Poland, right next door to the Ukraine, and into the Baltic states, and elsewhere as well. But I probably missed telling you something, and that was that Joshua was ordered to kill them, and in particular the Gibeonites deceived Joshua and pretended to be from afar away. They played the role. They played the role of the victim, and they hoodwinked Joshua into him giving his word that he would protect them. He didn't realize they were living right next door and encamped, and they were one of those groups he was supposed to eradicate. So when he realized he had made the mistake, he put them to work as water carriers and gathering firewood. He put them to menial labor, but he didn't kill them. So he honored his word that he gave them. Anyway, there was good reason, and I'm not going to go into that now, why Yahweh ordered them destroyed. Very good reason, and it was not just because Yahweh was a mean God. You need to stop thinking about that, because right now you need to start thinking about your own survival, and you need to turn to Yahweh so that he can infuse you with his wisdom and give you access to his mind, his Holy Spirit, so that you can be told the best choices for your life and do those. And Yahweh will step in, not just bless you, but fight for you. Well, the Khazarians were obliterated in 1100 AD, driven off. The problem is that we're dealing with those today in the Ukraine to a very large extent. Now, these bad guys started, I don't know if I want to get into it. I'm going to mention right now, Cliff High has got a wonderful video on the Khazarians. He speaks very offhand, and he tells you about their habit of wining and dining visitors. Because remember, the old tradition was that when somebody was traveling through your area, you put them up in your house. You know, you're obligated to offer them hospitality and to feed them and give them shelter and let them go on their way. Wish them well. Well, the Khazarians didn't like doing that too well, but they decided they were going to trap these guys. So when a guy came in, they'd basically seduce him into having a meal, staying with them, drinking, and they would also drug them up. And they would talk with them and learn all they could about this traveling merchant, probably on the way from the beginnings of the European nations over to the Orient. And then they would find out, of course, they knew their names, find out with everything they could about them, and then they would kill them, typically by poison. And then they would take their identities, pretend they were them, and go do their business, go do business as them. So these guys were identity thieves. And that's a main characteristic today. And the biggest thing I can tell you is that a lot of these guys decided to pretend that they were Jews. They adopted the religion. The name Bauer. Remember Bauer? What was Bauer's first name on the show 24? I liked that show, but then I realized the reason it was put forward and he was the hero was in homage to the Bauer family, which became named Rothschild. So the Rothschilds are Khazarians. A lot of people that came out of Germany in that particular area are Khazarians. The bankers in particular. Another thing about the Ukraine, and I got to get this out right now, is in the New Testament it talks about pharmacopoeia. That's the Greek word that's in there for sorcery. Well, they mean sorcery and they mean pharmacopoeia. They mean medicine. All modern medicines are based upon principles of toxicity and disabling. So these guys really knew poisons rather well. I believe that they had the knowledge base from not just centuries, millennia, and maybe even previous Earth ages. I think there's a group behind the scenes that helped them, and they developed this thing about the poisons. There's a group of women that majored in that basically and knew these concoctions, and that's how they got their power. So these guys have become the international bankers. They've stolen the planet. They've stolen everything they have basically, and they own you and me and their corporations. BlackRock, Vanguard, own us. They own our property. They hold our mortgages. I think our government, between our government and Vanguard, I think all the mortgages are held up. I'm not sure about that. That's something you need to investigate. But let's take it back to the beginning of this battle. Canaan, the Canaanites. The land of Canaan was settled by Cain and his children. And we have the story in Genesis chapter 4. I covered it in the last, about Cain's death and how he was killed by a family member of his named Lamech. So you need to remember this stuff. Now, at that particular point in history, there were no Edomites and there were no Jews. We didn't get the Edomites until Esau, Jacob's twin brother, sold his inheritance for a bowl of red porridge. The name for red was Edom. Edom means red. Red porridge, red lentils, whatever it was, Jacob could really cook. He lived in the tents. He was a mama's boy. Esau was a hunter. It was at that point that the Edomites came into existence. So that's important for you to know. So there weren't any Edomites until Esau's name was changed to Edom. Prior to that, we have the Canaanites. And what did Esau do that caused him to lose his inheritance and get kicked out of the family? He took a Canaanite woman to wife. He took a daughter of the people of the land, the Canaanites. And about 5 times, Yahweh told them, do not intermarry. Do not take their daughters for wives for your sons. Don't give your daughters to them for wives for their sons. Do not intermarry with them. Why is that? We're getting to it. Trying to keep my place and keep this organized and not sound so desperate to get it across. But this is important stuff. So, if we back up a little bit, Esau took one Canaanite woman to wife. And this is in the Bible, so we got good witness on it. We got the record. We got the evidence. When he saw how much it upset his parents, would that be, Rebecca, I believe. I have a little trouble with some of these families and the names, but I'll tell you. When Esau saw how much it upset his parents, he took a second Canaanite woman to wife. He rubbed their noses in it. Now, later, Esau realized he had made a mistake, but it was too late. He had already had children by these Canaanite wives. And then he took a daughter of Ishmael to wife, trying to make up for it. And he cried and sought to repent, but it was no good. It was a waste. He was gone. So, what was the problem with Canaanite women? Well, they were descendants of Cain. And they were descendants of the people of the land of Nod, east of the garden, the land of wanderers, the tent dwellers, the Mongoloids. And so Cain, when he was kicked out of the garden, went east to the land of Nod. There he took wives and he built cities. He named one after one of his sons. That's in the Bible pretty much right there. He built other cities on top of that one. I should say besides that one. I guess that's not accurate English. What was the problem with Cain? He only killed his brother. Actually, he killed his half-brother. He didn't kill his brother. He killed his half-brother. Cain became enraged because his offering to Yahweh was not acceptable, was not respected. Whereas Abel, his half-brother's offering to Yahweh was accepted. And he took Abel into the field, and the story is he smashed his skull with a rock, killed him, murdered him. From there, he was driven out of the garden. And he marries Mongoloids, and he has children, and they settle in the land of Canaan. Now, who was Cain's father? Well, most of you are going to say Satan was Cain's father, the father of all lies, as Jesus says in the New Testament, as Yahshua, his proper name, as he says in the New Testament. You know, your father was the father of all lies. He was a murderer in the beginning, and he was responsible for all of those deaths from all that time down to his, and he went down to I think it was the murder of Zechariah, between the altar and something else in the temple. The fellow was murdered right there in the temple. And Yahshua accused them of being guilty of all that. By the way, they're guilty of all the murders in the last century too, pretty much, and the wars and all that. The problem was that Cain was an Ish. That's the word Pastor Jerry Wiki pointed out in the original text. And at that point, the word Ish meant hybrid. I think the meaning has changed with use over time. Over time and with use has changed. So now we have something like the British, the Amish. Cain was fathered when Eve was seduced and had sex with Gadriel. We don't have good data on that. We don't understand the nature of that. Was it a rape of deception? Was it an outright knockdown physical rape? Was it an act of prostitution? Was it a seduction? We don't have good data on that, so we don't know the events surrounding that. So I just want to point that out to you, because you'll hear all sorts of things. One of those being, why do you think they call it the oldest profession in the world? I think that some of you out there will find the books, the extra biblical books, and hopefully bring that to my attention. Put it in the comments if you're seeing this and you already know what it is. I would appreciate that very much. By the way, do like and comment and subscribe and share these videos. Get these out there. I prefer to think of Satan as being a class of angel, a race of angel, rather than a particular angel in particular. And if we look up the name from which we got the name of God, by the way, Gadriel, his full name, that's the name of the fallen angel, one of the 5 leaders of the fallen angels who conspired at Mount Hermon to take all of the daughters of men for wives that they wanted. One of my brothers recently pointed out to me, as another fellow who's not a Bible scholar Michael Khazarian has been really reading and researching this for about 35 years, and he said never in his reading did he find any place where the women had protested being taken by these fallen angels. And to that, my brother in the faith, bless him, Yahweh bless him, Randy told me straight out, you don't take a woman to wife. You are given a wife. So the father gives the daughter. So that's the proper procedure, if you will. That's the proper order, is that a woman is given in marriage, not taken in marriage. So we just don't know what happened with all of that. And I'll get into that in another one, because I think the original sin was that sin and not what Adam and Eve did in the garden in particular. So we have Gadriel seducing Eve. Eve complains about that later to Creator Father Yahweh. And we have text message just came through about puppy dogs and caught my eye. Guy wants to trade me dogs. I don't want to do that. I'd like to get the dog back that I had before, but I spent so much on this dog, I don't want to do that. She needs a strong leader. I've learned a lot about myself this summer. I don't want to talk about myself here. What I want to point out is that the people that we're dealing with today, Joshua failed to do his duty as ordered and did not take them all out, and they were driven into the rest of the earth. They formed other cities as well. These folks formed, Venice was their city. Carthage was apparently one of their cities. There's a kind of a mixed history on that. I'm not sure about that, but of Venice, I'm sure. And from there, we get the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, and we get the black nobility. And by the way, in case you're wondering what the black nobility means, I was thrown off because one of the Guelphs was a Negro in the portrait, and that's in medieval Florida. So that sort of shocked me, and I was wondering if that was the black nobility. And I wanted to talk with John. Oh my God, John. The former MI6 operative and great CIA guy. I read his books. John Cone. No. I'll probably think of it in a little bit. I wanted to meet with him, but he was old and feeble and did not want to meet with me because I wanted him to explain to me the difference between the Guelphs and the Gilbertines in Florence, Italy, where I went to school and was educated for a little bit. Okay. The 13 tribes of the Illuminati and the black nobility, in case you're wondering, the black nobility refers to those people who really are in charge behind these figureheads that they allow to have out there today. And in case you're wondering, I met one of those, and that was Walt Disney's granddaughter in Scottsdale, the most powerful person I ever met in my life, and she had the presence for it. She knows what's going on. She's a member of the Order of the Garter. And and the Queen's Privy Council. I bet she gives the Queen orders. I bet that guy was far more powerful than what we realize. Anyway, I want you to know that our problems are because we turned our backs on Yahweh, and as a result, he's turned his backs on us. The enemy has infiltrated us and has polluted us, has gotten us to pollute ourselves, has gotten us to choose evil over good, and as a result, we're going to suffer the consequences, just like the old Israelites, our grandfathers and grandmothers did. And by the way, remember, some of the consequences for some of the people back then was getting nuked. So we need to get control of our nation. We need to get rid of the Edomites once and for all. There's something in Revelations 2:9 and 3:9 about the Edomites and how they hide themselves. So I need you to understand that we're dealing with a long-standing war that started with a doggone rock and could end up with nukes. I need you to understand that we're dealing with something that started off with a physical altercation that resulted in murder. And today it could result in us having the pox, biological weaponry. What do you think they're doing working in those level 4 bioweapons labs all around Russia and just outside of China and throughout the world? Oh, in China and in the United States and in Russia. What do you think they're trying to weaponize? Read the Bible. You'll see a nuclear war in there. Read the Bible. You'll see people suffering from a pox, from a disease so horrible they wish they could die. It's all in there, folks. I hope this has helped you. It's probably going to take 2 days for this to upload. Sorry I went long. Go to my other channel, Dr. John Taylor Kent. I put up a 9-minute video. It may be uploaded maybe before evening time today. You'll want to see that because it tells you basically what has happened and why the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago and what they're trying to do, what they're trying to stop. And we have to put a stop. This FBI is not our FBI. We could do without this FBI completely and we'd be better off. The CIA never was ours. The British, a guy named Adlai Stevenson, I believe, he started it. A British guy started it. It was the OSS. Now, do you think the British are going to start something like our CIA and hand the reins over to us? No, they've been in charge of that the whole doggone time, in my opinion. And of course, it's not the British people. It's probably not even the people that are on that throne that don't belong there. It's the people that, well, the people behind the Bank of England for sure. The people in the city of London, that little area inside of what we call London proper, that isn't even part of Great Britain. It's its own sovereign nation. Just like Washington, D.C. is its own sovereign nation within the United States. And those laws were meant to rule over that little 10 square miles, not the whole country. They took us over. And it's just like that little patch of land inside of Rome. That is its own city. And underneath they've got 8 miles of corridors in their Bible, in their library downstairs. They've got all the old ancient texts down there. They know more than the rest of us because they got the books. They destroyed a lot of the books, and they put a lot of those books underground in their library. And in case you're wondering, the Pope, the white Pope, doesn't run the show. The black Pope across the street runs the show. That would be the Jesuit general. Likewise, it's my belief, just my belief, my hunch, the black nobility runs these kings and queens that we see up front. So I'm going to ask you, who runs our government today? Who is running the United States of America today? Who is it that has a stranglehold upon our nation and won't let go? Praise Yahweh.